Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Every now and then I like to look into some of the histories behind the companies where I find reels that I'm working on or where people ask me questions about and so on. And interestingly enough, I was just working on a reel. It was the Lawrence version of the Penn monospool reel, the number 27. It was a blatant copy of it. And I decided I'm going to see what I can find out about the Lawrence Company. And I thought I would share that with you in a brief video and maybe share a little bit about one of the documents I found on it. So first off, who is the Lawrence Tackle Company? It was called the Lawrence Tackle Manufacturing Company, and it was located on Fifth Avenue in New York City. Interestingly enough, it was sharing an address with the New York Toy Company, and it became a subdivision of the New York Toy Company. The New York Toy Company was looking for an extension in sporting goods and chose fishing as one of those extensions. Sound familiar? Well, Lionel did that too. So if you see the base reels or some of the other reels that are out there, you'll see a division of Lionel. So it was a natural extension for toy companies, and Lawrence was one of those for the New York Toy Company. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to find out too much about New York Toy Company because, well, if you go and do an internet search on New York Toy Company, you can imagine what you're going to find in those thousands and thousands of results. And all I've learned is that they got sued an awful lot for trying to make copies of reels, even when in the days before patent enforcement and patent protection was very significant. Well, Lawrence made a reel called the Zephyr. This is not a Zephyr, this is a Pfluger, but the Zephyr looked very similar. It had a drag adjustment on the one side of the post. It had a level line feature. It had a cork arbor spacer on there, and it was made for the same purposes, which was a bait casting reel. Interestingly enough, they published a manual that I was able to find. I found it on the Orca site, and what I found in there I thought was particularly interesting, so I thought I would share that with you. So if you like these kinds of videos, before I get started, why don't you go ahead and subscribe to my channel, and if you do subscribe, please hit the notification. That way you'll see all the videos that I post, and most of the time, as you're aware, I'm posting the videos on how to take apart and service reels or repair reels, and sometimes we'll do product reviews on reels, and every now and then I'll do a history of a reel company like we're doing here. So if you hit that subscribe and you hit the notifications, it'll be appreciated, certainly, and you'll get to see what videos I'm doing, and you can choose which ones you would like to see. Well, I thought this reel and this manual was particularly fascinating. How many of us today ever stop to read the manuals on what's done? Most of the time we won't even read the instructions on how to put something together. And many times, well, like my fishing channel, folks will start showing up there because they got started and couldn't quite figure it out. Well, this one isn't how to put a reel together. This manual is all about how to use your reel and how to care for your reel. And some of those tips are very good today. And some of those tips, well, I guess maybe we would be questioning them. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So let's start with this. The first thing it says is when you're casting, don't put your clicker button on. That's not part of it, and it will retard the action of that spool. It won't allow you to cast far enough. That makes sense. Well, I learned something when I read this manual. What's the purpose of that button? Well, we all know that button has a bait alarm, but the first purpose that they cited was to keep the spool locked in when you're not fishing. Because if you lock that spool in, the line's not going to unspool and get all tangled and bird's nested and the like from just the travel of the handle. Very interesting point there. So their actual how to use the reel became a whole bunch of how not to use the reel or a bunch of don'ts. And that was the first one. Don't cast with the click on. It's not intended as a drag. Well, this is your drag washer here. The second one, don't cast with a partially filled spool. Well, in their reels, they used a cork arbor, which took up a lot of the spacing for line. And remember, line was pretty expensive in those days. I guess you could compare it to modern day braid, where it's very expensive. And especially if you had an older casting reel like this with a very small arbor, well, if you put on 100 yards of line, you may only come halfway through. They're telling you don't do that. If necessary, add backing. And well, we've all taken reels apart where we've seen backing of old string, we've seen electrical tape, we've seen old line underneath, and that's exactly what they're recommending. They say you will not cast it as far if you have a partially spooled reel. That makes sense. There's more line per turn on the outside than there is on the inside. Because the circumference of it is greater, you're going to throw it further with each turn of the spool. So back your reel, and if you need to, use string or old line as the backing if you don't have a cork arbor. So kind of interesting. The third one was all about using this reel in a boat. And when it said when you use the reel for trolling, don't lay the reel on the bottom of the boat. Sage advice. That will you want to keep the reel away from dirt and grit and grime and mud and muck and all of the stuff that would be on the bottom of a boat, including some bilge water, I guess. So keep your reel out of harm's way. Well, let's add a little bit to that. In today's world, don't lay your rod on the beach or the bank. And by all means, if you're using it at a pier or something, make sure that it is safe from harm's way. I often take a stroll on the beach and walk with my wife and tell her, well, there's my next customer coming in, because I see how that reel is being treated on the beach. Whether it's laying on the beach, a beach blanket or whatever, it can guarantee you some issues. So number 3 was don't leave your reel on the bottom of the boat, and we've added a few there. The fourth one I actually enjoy. Don't use your reel as a winch. And I'm going to quote verbatim on this one. If you insist on hooking stumps and logs and dragging them to the boat, use a block and tackle. Your reel is designed to catch very big fish, and it will. And this reel can hold big, strong, fighting fish. What more can you ask of it? Don't use it as a winch. I like that one. And the last of the tips on how to use your reel, don't put the reel in a bag that has a loose snap. That would be something like a cotton or a wool. Instead, use either a leather carrying case or a leather bag. Why? Because the fibers from that nap can get trapped in the level line guide, and it can foul that guide and cause it to fail. Well, those are interesting thoughts on the how to use your reel. How do you take the reel apart, and how do you clean it? Well, pre-YouTube, they went pretty extensively into how to remove the screws, how to remove the line guide, how to remove the pawl, and how to completely take this apart. And if you watch my YouTube videos now, where you'll see most of the reel services that I do involve a complete disassembly. Well, here's one in terms of how to clean the reel, which I think is from a bygone era. They tell you after you take the reel apart, wash every part carefully in kerosene or gasoline. Well, surprisingly, they didn't say, and don't smoke while you're doing that. But I think by today's standards, the modern solvents that we have, things like penetrating oils and degreasers and the like, not only are a much safer approach with less odor and the like, but do equally as good a job. But the point was, keep your reel and your reel parts clean. Get rid of the old greases and the like. Well, the last one, I get a question a lot of times, how do you lubricate the reels? And this one was just recommending oil for this. They were not recommending greases, and I'm not sure the greases were even available at the time. The reels would have been the 1930s and 1940s. Well, it tells you a drop of oil in each side bearing, 2 drops of oil on your line guide, 1 drop of oil on your pawl, and when you have this apart, inside the handle here there will be a gear sleeve, and it says 3 drops of oil. It cautions against over-oiling. It tells you on your main gear, only oil about half the gear, and you'll see with me I do not put the greases and the oils in every tooth. And it tells you, among other things, do not oil the rim of your spool, because that will retard the action of your cast. Well, it's kind of interesting just to see how these recommendations have held up over time, a little bit about how to use the reel, not abuse the reel, And isn't that true about today's reels as well? A lot of the reels that I get in, well, simply didn't follow age-old wisdom here. Stuff that's probably 60 or 70 years old in text form. And a lot of this stuff is held true to this day. So I hope you've enjoyed a little bit behind who the Lawrence Tackle Company was, a little bit about the products they made, and a little fun look into the tips and advice in their manuals. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, wishing everybody to stay safe, stay well, and stay watching, and adding a special shout out to our first responders and essential personnel who are keeping us safe during the pandemic. Please, everyone, have a great day.